Hello, and welcome back to this video where we're going to continue our brief overview of ethical systems. And in this video, we're going to take a look at moral objectivism. Before we dive into what is moral objectivism, it's necessary to make sure that we're comfortable with two kind of conflicting terms, two terms that are going to be important for understanding the relationship between moral objectivism, which we're addressing within this video, and ethical relativism, which we have covered previously. So the concepts are those of being concrete versus being abstract. And so for something to be concrete, basically what we're looking at is going to be something that exists in the real world. And so it has kind of real physical, you can think about it as tangible qualities or characteristics. And therefore, it is something that we can see as being real. It is something that we can use our senses to either see it, to feel it, we maybe even extend it even further to smell or to taste it. But we can basically use our senses to see this real object within the world. In contrast, an object that is abstract is going to be something that is more of an idea or a concept as opposed to a physical or real object. And so an abstract concept does not exist in the world, but it's going to have some intangible qualities, ideas, and concepts. And so it exists. It exists as an idea, but we can't put hands on it. We can't touch it. We can't necessarily see it because we can't feel it with our existing senses. So in order to understand what moral objectivism is, it's first necessary to make sure we're comfortable with the term objectivism. Now, objectivism is basically a belief that certain things, especially moral truths or ethical principles, are going to be existing independent of human knowledge or perception of them. And so basically this idea that certain moral truths, certain ethical principles are going to be present whether we're aware of them or not, whether we can see them, whether we can sense them in any way. And as the slide says, objectivism extends to the existence of a physical reality outside of our sense perceptions, claiming that this exists outside of our ability to kind of see it and interpret this. And again, going to the Declaration of Independence for an example of this, Thomas Jefferson's words here, we hold these truths to be self-evident. It's not necessary that we go and we try to discover them. It's not necessary that we try to feel them and measure them and determine their size or their weights. They're there irregardless of our ability to use our senses to perceive them. So when we apply this definition of objectivism to the concept of moral objectivism, what we come up with is this idea that what we're looking for in moral objectivism is objective, universal moral principles. So objective in this definition, basically saying that they exist and that it's not dependent upon individual perception, individual kind of views on what should be there. It's going to be universal, so it's going to be applying to all people at all times. And so this view of moral objectivism is this idea that we have moral principles that are going to be existing, and because they're objective and universal, they're going to be valid for all people in all social environments, so all cultures and all societies at all times. And so there's going to be a distinct right way and a distinct wrong way to approach things. So if you take this concept of moral objectivism to an extreme, what you end up with is moral absolutism. And so moral absolutism is this idea that these objective, universal moral principles that we said were the basis of moral objectivism are going to apply regardless of the context. They're non-overridable, and so basically you must follow these rules. They must never be violated, and under no circumstances, no exceptions, are you able to go against them. And so this would mean basically that, under these circumstances, you still got to follow the rules. You've still got to follow what's going on. And so moral absolutism is going to be the opposite of the subjective ethical relativism And again, remember, the subjective ethical relativism is this concept that the ethics of a society are going to be relative to that society and basically going along with what everybody else is agreeing to go along with. So an example of moral objectivism would be natural law theory. Now, with the natural law theory, there's a view that this universal, objective moral principles are going to be an eternal moral law. And so it exists there. It exists outside of humanity. It exists outside of society. It is going to be there present in the world. And what's necessary is that we need to discover it. We need to apply logic and reason to be able to determine what are these objective, universal moral rules, moral laws, moral code as we think about that. So for the proponents of natural law, there are some key ideas that are going to be important. The first idea is that human beings are basically rational, and we have a rational nature that, if you want to look at it, has been established by a deity, and that deity then has designed life and the ability. These natural laws, these objective moral codes, are designed to allow human beings to live and flourish following these natural laws, this natural way of doing things. You can take this a step further and say that even without a knowledge of a God or a deity to provide you with the insight, the rules to live by, these natural laws, these objective moral principles can be discovered using logic and using reason to be able to come up with them because they exist there. They're present within kind of the nature or natural way of viewing things. So if we dive deeper into these concepts associated with natural law and look at this in relationship to moral objectivism, in which these moral principles, these ethical codes, are basically going to apply to all people in all situations, in all societies, at all times, what we see is that these natural laws then need to be universal and unchangeable because they apply to all people in all situations at all times. And therefore, they don't change. And so therefore, if we can discover what these natural laws tell us is the appropriate way to be acting ethically, acting morally, then we should use these natural laws to judge society and society's flaws. And so we should build the society's laws, the laws that we are following on, what is permitted and what is banned, by following these concepts associated with natural laws. So if we're talking about these concepts and the need to kind of try to understand them without necessarily being able to use our senses to be able to determine them, we can look at another example of a natural law. And this is the concept of gravity. And so, for many people, you've heard about the study of gravity. And so, we've got Galileo over here, kind of dropping objects out of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, taking kind of measurements and seeing, whether large objects or small objects fall faster or slower, or, maybe at the same speed. And so we've got that concept that's going to be going there. The laws of gravity, basically the mathematical laws associated with gravity, were delineated and assigned to Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was an English physicist and mathematician in the mid-1600s who basically observed the force of gravity on an object. It's been described as an apple falling from a tree, and basically use that to come up with what would be viewed now as the laws of gravity. So if we apply this concept of the law of gravity to our view of natural law as well as this moral objectivism, we see that the concept is that these natural laws, these moral codes, are going to be present whether or not man perceives them, whether or not man has discovered them before. And so for many of us studying in the United States, our view of gravity is based on Isaac Newton mathematically describing it about mid-1600s. But we can look at other cultures. And so here's an example of an Indian mathematician and astronomer, Aryabhata. And I apologize, I'm probably not pronouncing this correctly. About 500 CE, so basically maybe 1100 years before Sir Isaac Newton, has gone through and discovered gravity, basically going and beginning to study mathematically these concepts of gravity. And so again, this concept in moral objectivism, this concept of natural law, is that these ethical codes, these moral rules, are going to be present whether or not we have discovered them or not. And so this is just an example of this. Okay, so to end up with our view of these natural laws, a quote that has been attributed to Adam Savage, co-host of the Discovery Channel series Mythbusters, no longer in active production now, but the reruns are available on a number of stations, including the Discovery Channel. And he, among others, have said, gravity, it's not just a good idea, it's the law. And so this basically says that this natural law theory, this view of moral objectivism, is this concept that there would be moral codes, ethical principles, guiding principles that are going to be present regardless of whether or not man has discovered them. We don't need to know about gravity. We don't need to know the mathematical formula of gravity to be able to see the action of gravity. You toss an object in the air, it's going to fall. You trip, you're probably not going to fall up into the air, you're going to fall down on the ground as a result of gravity being present. Okay, so thank you for listening to this video on moral objectivism. Come back for part 2 for moral objectivism, where we're going to take a look at the doctrine of the double effect and apply this a little bit further.